Hello everybody and welcome to today's HR webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really great to see some familiar names on the participants list, so thank you very much. So as you will be aware, today's webinar is going to be focusing on age discrimination in the workplace. So as I'm sure lots of you are aware, so my name's Sophie, I work in the HR team at Code, so I'm sure I've spoke to lots of you on the phone lines. So we're first of all today going to look at our aims and objectives. So our aim from today's session, we want to increase our understanding of how we can prevent age discrimination in the workplace and then reduce our risk of a tribunal claim. We're going to look at some objectives, the first one being to discuss an overview of employee rights relating to the 4 types of age discrimination. We're then going to look at highlighting the risks of allowing discriminatory behaviour in the practice. And throughout the session today, we're going to also explore how Code Total HR provides you with useful policies and template letters that can really help practices comply with your legal obligations. So the learning outcomes from today's session. Number 1 is to avoid those potentially costly mistakes during recruitment processes that are related to age discrimination. We're going to look at improving our understanding of the benefits of having an age-diverse workforce. And we're going to explore throughout the session and understand the statutory employment rights that are related to age discrimination, in particular under the Equality Act. We're going to do this today by focusing on several key topics. The first one being the 4 types of age discrimination. So we're going to break that down for you. We're going to look at those signs to the signs to look out for in a workplace that could show that there's age discrimination prevalent there. We're going to look at an ageing population and carer responsibilities that they may have. We're going to explore how we can manage an ageing workforce. And then we're going to look at the links with termination and your risks of age discrimination. And we're going to end today's session by looking at how we can minimise that risk of a potential discrimination claim. So we're going to start today's session by exploring firstly our legal framework and looking at who exactly is protected under that framework. So the framework is the Equality Act. So that act came into force back in 2010 and it's an act that's in force to protect society really from unfair treatment. For those of you who aren't aware, the Equality Act identifies 9 protected characteristics. And age is one of those characteristics that's identified. Therefore, the Equality Act makes it unlawful to discriminate against somebody because of age. It's not necessary to have a certain length of service to be able to make an age discrimination claim. In fact, you don't need to be employed at all. So your self-employed team members have the right to raise age discrimination claims just as much as somebody who is actually looking at your job adverts. So it can be candidates and job applicants who will also have that right. Again, it's not necessary to be of a certain age group to claim discrimination. So somebody who is potentially in their maybe 20s or 30s could feel just as discriminated against as someone who is in their late 50s or 60s. So there's no specific age limit or restriction on an age group. And where can it happen? Well, really, I've already touched on one place, which is during your recruitment process with your candidates and job applicants. So that's at the beginning of your employment life cycle, but it can actually occur throughout the life cycle, really. So through the recruitment, the pay and benefits, looking at flexible working applications, right through to the end of employment where you're looking at potentially redundancies, terminations, capability as well. So there's a risk associated with each of those areas. So we're also going to sort of set the scene for you really and have a look at and just identify why we are here today. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, we are in a time where we do have an ageing population. So back in 2011, the government in charge at the time decided to abolish the default retirement age. And now it's completely at the discretion of the employee, not the employer, when they decide they need to or want to retire. So that retirement age is completely abolished now, and it was actually phased out in that same year. So between the April and October of that year, it was completely phased out, and it's now against the law to dismiss on the grounds of retirement. I think the decision to abolish that retirement age was mainly down to the fact that we are all living longer lives, we have healthier lifestyles, there's reduced smoking rates, and also a better understanding of illnesses and diseases and how we treat them. And that in turn really has sort of led the government to publish the fact that by the 2030s, half of adults in the UK are going to be over the age of 50. Therefore, that age group are going to become more and more, we need to understand that age group more and more as employers, because we're going to become quite reliant on them. The Office of National Statistics have also published the fact that 1 in 4 older female workers and 1 in 8 older male workers actually have caring responsibilities. Now, this may be for their childcare, so childcare needs for their children, but it's also sort of on the increase that those caring responsibilities are for older family members. So that could be their parents or even their grandparents. So it's an important factor that we need to take into consideration as employers. We need to understand how we can support and manage that group of people. So one of our first topics we're going to look at are the 4 types of age discrimination. So the 4 types are direct discrimination, indirect, harassment, and victimisation. Direct discrimination, just to confuse everybody, is also broken down into 3 different subtypes. So you have your ordinary direct, which is discriminating against somebody because of their actual age, so the age they actually are. Direct by association is discriminating against somebody because they are associated with someone of an age. So this, for example, could be colleagues, or it could be family members. Direct by perception is discriminating against somebody because of the age that you perceive them to be, whether that's right or wrong. Moving on to indirect. So indirect discrimination is quite often harder to identify than direct, and it's quite often not intentional. But there doesn't need to be that intent there for somebody to raise an age discrimination claim. So the Equality Act defines indirect discrimination as having a provision, criteria, or practice that puts a certain age group at a detriment. So this is thinking about things like your practice policies, procedures, and rules. So are they fair? Are they inclusive? Or is there a certain age group that could potentially be at a detriment because of these? And then harassment. So harassment is our 3rd type, and the law defines harassment as unwanted behaviour or conduct that has the effect of violating someone's dignity or intimidating them. So harassment is quite often bullying behaviour, so that could be both written, verbal, and physical. So it could be that type of behaviour that would be deemed as harassment if it's related to age. And then victimisation, so slightly different from harassment. It's where somebody is suffering a detriment, a disadvantage, or harm due to the fact that they have maybe raised an age discrimination claim, they have supported someone else's age discrimination claim, or you may feel that they're about to raise a discrimination claim. So if it comes into any of those categories and you're treating them differently, that is then causing them harm or a disadvantage, that would be potentially victimisation with relation to age discrimination. So those are the 4 types of age discrimination. So moving on, we're going to have a look at the signs of age discrimination within a workplace environment. So the first one is ageist language. Now, this type of language can also be quite closely linked with harassment and that bullying type behaviour. Examples of ageist language, so it could be older team members being referred to as grandma or grandpa, maybe you're calling them old-timers, so it's thinking about the language that you're using to reference them. Similarly, if you are referencing your younger team members, maybe baby-faced or insinuating they're chucking their toys out the pram, again, this is the type of language that could potentially be deemed as age discrimination. It's also quite sort of appropriate just to let you know it's not just sort of your older team members that may suffer discrimination. It can be younger team members as well, as we've already sort of touched upon. The next one I have on here is training and promotion opportunities. And it's more around the fact of denying those training or promotion opportunities. So, for example, here we're thinking about trying not to make assumptions. So just because somebody is of a particular age group, don't sort of deny them the opportunity to go for a promotion in the practice, or deny them the opportunity to take some training, for example. So this could be, maybe you have a younger team member who you feel potentially hasn't got the skills to go for that promotion. So you're disregarding, giving them that opportunity to apply. That could potentially be age discrimination because you're not giving that fair and equal opportunity. Likewise, thinking about training within the workplace. So if you're excluding team members over 50, for example, from attending a certain training session, maybe because you think they're coasting towards retirement, that's definitely going to be in the realms of age discrimination there, because you're excluding that whole age group. Pay and benefits is also an area where there could be potential signs of discrimination. So here we're thinking about sort of paying team members at different rates directly related to their age. So this is not where we're saying that you can't pay somebody more because they have, they've got more knowledge or skills of that role. It's about relating the pay directly to their age, and that's where it would become discriminatory. And with benefits, so benefits, a really good example, I suppose, of potentially discriminatory benefits is if you have holiday policies within the practice and you maybe reward long service. So the Equality Act and law in general does allow employers to make improvements to benefits and pay over time. But really there is a sort of a cap there on the 5-year mark. So if you've got benefits that are sort of going up over that 5-year mark, so for example, if you've got, for 15-year service, we'll give you an extra 5 days holiday, you are potentially putting your younger team members at a detriment there because they haven't had that same opportunity to gain that length of service with you. And then meetings and events, which you might find a bit of a strange one, but again, we're thinking about denying them the opportunity to attend. So this could be meetings within the workplace. If you feel that maybe you're assuming again that a certain age group won't want to attend a meeting, or work socials as well. So if work and the practice are organising these social events, they're really an extension of your workplace, and you should still be thinking about the risks of discrimination there. So it's about ensuring that sort of work socials, meetings and events are open to the whole team and not just to certain age groups. And now we're going to have a look at how we can manage an ageing workforce in particular. So here we're thinking about things like appraisals. Now, obviously we recognise that appraisals are necessary for all team members, and we do really encourage that. However, appraisals for your sort of older team members can be a really good opportunity to talk about their future plans. And as long as you're using the same questions and you're being consistent across the board, so you're asking everybody the same set of questions in that appraisal, then you can start to talk about their goals for the sort of short term, medium term and long term. And that can raise some opportunity for discussions there. Appraisals are also quite closely linked with capability. So if you're in the unfortunate position where you feel like your older team member may not be capable for the role anymore, and that could be due to potentially ill health or deteriorating health, then it's really important that you follow the right procedure. And that procedure would be your capability route. And your appraisals will come into their own here, because you can use appraisals quite often as that informal capability stage. So as long as your policies and procedures allow for it, that appraisal can become part of the capability route for you. And appraisals are also really good audit trails to show that you have been supporting that team member, and so forth. So everybody on today's webinar, you will have access to the Code website, where you can explore and have a look at my colleague Hannah's webinar on performance management. So that's all to do with your capability procedures. Hannah will break that down for you and explain it in more detail. So I would really recommend, if you're in that situation, to have a watch of that one. Our iComply members do have access to the capability policy and procedure on iComply as well, and I will be providing the module reference number for that at the end of the session today. Flexible working is also a really good supportive tool for helping to manage your ageing team members. So here we're thinking about the reasons for flexible working could be potentially for those carer responsibilities we've already spoke about. So that could be that they, maybe need to reduce their hours or days due to the fact that they have a responsibility to care for their elderly parents or grandparents even. And it can also really support and help with a transition into retirement. So, reducing days and hours over a certain, number of months or even years can help with the transition into that retirement phase. And that would really help to support and manage that team member. Just moving on, so we've got the health and wellbeing and financial advice. So these two factors, both health and finances, will be, really key factors and really key decision making tools when your team members are thinking about retiring and considering that's the next step in their life. Therefore, sort of helping them and supporting them with this area will really help with the morale of your team. So health-wise, it's really about having an open door policy, encouraging them to come to you if they have any queries or concerns, and encouraging them to seek support at the earliest available opportunity, really. It also might be worth having a think about building some links with some occupational health advisors. This will help with your well-being and also the health of your team members as well. Occupational health can also come in really helpful when you're looking at that capability route. So it all kind of interlinks. And then financial advice, it is just a suggestion. It's not something you have to do, but it might be nice to be able to support that team member with the decisions that they're having to take on. Financial advice could come in the form direct from your own accountant if you can do that. If not, and you have practice insurances that come along with a EAP number, which is an employee assistance program, then it might be worth providing that number to your team member. And quite often those programs can provide financial advice and support. For our HR, so our total HR members, if you have chosen to take out the additional HR insurance, you do have an EAP number that comes with that insurance program. So if you're unsure and you want access to that number and you don't know it, just give us a call or give your advisor a call and they'll be able to signpost you to that. So we're moving on and now having a look at the benefits of an age diverse workforce. So this is thinking about not only your older team members, but having a real mix of ages within the practice. So the first benefit, and I suppose the most obvious to everybody, is that you're going to have a wealth of knowledge and experience. And that knowledge and experience can be passed down from your older team members, but it can also be passed up from your younger team members as well. So younger team members coming into the practice may have some new ideas, and your sort of older team members can explore those with them as well. And also sharing sort of life experiences is really sort of a nice benefit of having that age diverse workforce. Studies have shown and proven that having age diversity in the workplace does build resilience, so it will build a resilient team for you. And I've got relatable on here as well, because some patients may, come into the practice and feel more comfortable speaking to someone of their same or similar age. So having that mix of ages and that diverse workforce will really help to make sure that your patients feel that they're relatable. Having an age diverse workforce will also be able to lower your turnover and not increase, it will be able to reduce your recruitment costs and also the time you're spending on recruiting as well. So if you've got that age diverse workforce, they're resilient, they're all working together, you're going to be able to retain those team members. And then lastly, the practice reputation. So again, this is linked with your patients and having that relatability, but also thinking about the fact that when your team members come in, they're building that rapport, and they might be, seeing the same person every time they come as well, which is really nice for your practice reputation. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to move on and look at certain areas of the employment life cycle. So the first one, right at the beginning, is the recruitment stage. And we've just identified for you some key areas where you're potentially going to be at risk of discrimination, in association with age. So the first area is your job adverts. So right at the beginning, we're looking at the advert wording and ensuring that it's inclusive. We're not discriminating against somebody of a certain age group in any way. Quite a lot of online job boards do actually have a filter that will check your advert wording for you and will refuse you to publish it if it does see anything discriminatory. But I wouldn't rely on that. So if you're publishing to Facebook or your practice website or even in the newspaper, nobody's going to do that for you. So it's really, really crucial that you go through your advert wording with a fine-tooth comb. So you're really looking to avoid any discriminatory language in there, so any ageist language. So thinking about things like you want a mature, a mature candidate or a mature person to apply for the role. Likewise, if you're looking at someone who you want someone youthful, those are the types of ageist language to avoid in your job adverts. Moving on to selection criteria. So it's about ensuring that your selection criteria is inclusive when thinking about age. So if you're setting unrealistic goals in terms of you want someone with maybe 10 years experience or even 5 years experience, that is actually discriminating against a whole age group there because they haven't had that opportunity. So it's just having a think about, what you do need for the role and ensuring it's age inclusive. Very similar to when you come onto your shortlisting, ensuring that you're not putting barriers in the way, I suppose, of people of a certain age group. A way that you can do this quite often and reduce your risk here is by ensuring that your managers who are in charge of the recruitment process for you have the skills and knowledge that they need, so they're aware of their obligations really under the Equality Act. They're aware of the signs to look out for. And then interview questions is also a really key one. Our iComply members, you do have access to interview questions, some templates on iComply. So we just really recommend that before you are going through that interview stage, be it on the telephone or sort of formally, that you've sort of took some time to consider the questions that you're going to ask. So you're planning them and they're not sort of just, popping into your head when you're asking it, because you need to ensure that you're asking the same set of questions to each candidate to ensure you're being fair and inclusive. So those are the sort of areas that we'd really recommend ensuring you're managing your risk there. And then moving on to the opposite end really of an employee life cycle, which is where your team members may be considering retirement. Now, I have already mentioned that back in 2011, that default retirement age was abolished by the government. So now it's completely up to that team member when they choose to retire. That being said, it doesn't prevent you from having conversations with your team with regards to their future plans. And that can be done, as I've already mentioned, in the appraisal process. So as long as you're asking everybody and each team member in the practice the same set of questions, then you can, it gives that team member really a good opportunity to start those lines of communication with you. If you have a team member who has decided to retire from the practice, the process they would be following is a resignation, and it would be for the reason of retirement. They would be subject to providing you with the same notice they would if they were just resigning. So that would be in their terms and conditions of employment. And they'd also need to pop that in writing for you. Just thinking about unfair treatment here. So if your team member has sort of started those conversations that they are thinking about retiring, or if they have actually put in their resignation for reasons of retirement, your risk doesn't automatically sort of end there. It's continued all throughout the notice period and throughout those conversations. So it's important to still have this, these risks in mind and treat that team member equally and fairly. Now, we did just want to highlight the fact that it is applicable in some certain circumstances and very sort of limited circumstances, to be honest with you, that you are able to set a retirement age. And it's generally in only in sort of a few industries that you can do this. but you would need to have a very strong, valid business reason why, and it would also need to meet the needs of society in some way. So it wouldn't be enough just to say that the practice has decided this because of X, Y, and Z. It would also need to be a collaborative with the needs of the society. So that's why it's quite a tricky one to prove, and why a lot of employers don't tend to do this. So moving on to termination, and we're looking at the link with age discrimination here. So as I've already touched on, that default retirement age has been abolished. So if you do dismiss a team member for reasons of retirement, it would be an automatically unfair dismissal under the Employment Rights Act, and that would be grounds for unfair dismissal there. So you'd be in breach of not only the Equality Act with regards to age discrimination, but you'd also be in breach of the Employment Rights Act. Same goes for constructive dismissal. So for those of you who aren't aware, constructive dismissal is where you've made the practice and environment as such that that team member feels they are no longer able to work there. It may be that you've made their job completely untenable for them, and they've chosen to resign off the back of that treatment. So your risk there again would be an unfair dismissal, and also if it's because of the age, then it would be age discrimination as well. If you're in the position where you're looking at making genuine redundancies, you just need to ensure that your selection criteria, your pools of job roles, and going forward and thinking about selecting the team members for redundancy needs to be inclusive. So you need to ensure that you aren't treating a certain age group differently in terms of your selection criteria or your selection matrix. So you're sort of removing the factor of age from that redundancy situation. So it's about being sort of transparent and open within that process, and not selecting somebody for redundancy just because of their age. We do have quite a lot of calls on the helpline actually, where practice owners or managers have already started conversations with team members who maybe aren't capable of doing their role anymore because of ill health or because of deteriorating health. And that's down to, and they sort of start the redundancy conversations. Now, I completely understand the sentiment and why you would feel that redundancy is a nicer end to the employment, but it is full of risk following the wrong process. So to follow the right process, you're going to be reducing your risk of that age discrimination claim. If you were to follow a redundancy process for a team member who's not capable of doing their role anymore, then you would not only be at risk of age discrimination, but again, it would be an unfair dismissal because you followed the wrong process. There'll be flaws in your process because it's not genuine. And that brings me on to procedures. So just ensuring really that you're following the right procedure for the right reasons, and that will again reduce your risk there. And I did just want to bring up the menopause actually. So the menopause isn't on our topic list, but we did think in the HR team that it's quite a relevant topic to sort of raise awareness of as part of the webinar today. So really we're thinking about raising awareness to reduce the stigma that the menopause has, and to have those conversations in the practice with your team. You want to make sure that your team members would feel comfortable coming to you and sort of disclosing information. So for those of you who aren't aware, the menopause occurs in women between the ages of 45 to 55 years old, and it can typically last anywhere between 4 and 8 years. So 3 out of 4 women do experience symptoms, and those symptoms can vary from individual to individual. Symptoms to look out for could be persistent headaches. Sleep deprivation is also a symptom that could occur. So if your team members are coming in and they're particularly tired, or they're having different moods within the practice, so you see the changes in mood, that can also be a symptom to pick up on, as well as probably the most common, which is the hot flushes. So have a think about this as an employer, and how you can support them in terms of reasonable adjustments. So adjustments don't have to be expensive or really big to be reasonable. So we're thinking about even small things like allowing that team member more regular rest breaks, just to go and grab maybe a cold drink if they need to. And also thinking about whether you can make adjustments to your uniform policy. So if they are particularly uncomfortable, then you're allowing them that flexibility there. So it obviously wasn't something on the topic list, but something we were quite passionate about raising awareness of. And lastly, we're just going to cover for you very quickly where discrimination may potentially be lawful. Now, we do kind of want to caveat this with the fact that a lot of age discrimination claims are going to be sort of governed by case law, so therefore it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. So it's quite difficult to advise on, really. But we did want to just highlight to you these three areas. The first one is that you would have a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. So your legitimate aim would need to be a very strong, valid business reason, and your proportionate means would need to be reasonable actions. The second is if you have an occupational requirement. So this would need to be crucial to the post, not one of many factors, and would need to relate to the nature of the job. And then thirdly is positive action. Positive action can quite often take place during a recruitment process where you decide to positively discriminate against a certain age group, and you may choose to employ somebody because they are potentially that age group is low in numbers or at a disadvantage in the practice. So as long as those candidates are in a complete tie-break situation where they have scored exactly the same across the board, then that would be grounds of maybe potentially looking at positive action there. But again, just to kind of reiterate, it is a very risky area of law, to be honest, and something that is governed by case law, so very much on a case-by-case basis. And we also can't sort of stress highly enough how, if you are in this situation and you feel one of these areas may apply to you, to really get some expert advice and try and manage your risk there. So just in summary then, coming towards the end of the session today, we've had a look at the Equality Act, and in particular age as that protected characteristic. We've had a look at some ways of managing an ageing workforce and the benefits of having age diversity in the workplace. We've focused on recruitment, retirement and termination, and we've also touched upon the menopause for you as well. So now let's have a look at how we can minimise our risk. So these are some things that we've been talking about throughout the session today, but just to kind of reiterate, avoid making assumptions. So this is when we're thinking right back to the start of the session, avoid assuming that a certain age group won't want to attend a meeting or have some further training or be sort of part of a promotion opportunity. So we can't stress highly enough how you should avoid making assumptions. Secondly, ensure your policies, practices and rules are age inclusive. So this is going back to your indirect discrimination here. So just have a check and ensure that there's nothing that could be grounds for age discrimination in them. Thirdly, ensure your vacancies, promotion and training opportunities are communicated fairly. So this is looking back at our discrimination again. So just ensuring that everybody has the fair and equal opportunity. And we'd also consider that you look at maybe getting some training for your practice on equality, diversity and discrimination. Now this is really crucial for a manager's role, but it's also good to have for the rest of the team as well. And I do believe it is a step in I Comply as well. And sort of interlinked with the training is ensuring that your recruitment managers are fully aware of their risks and their obligations with regards to the Equality Act. Coming back to that redundancy for the wrong reasons, ensure you're following the correct procedure for the correct reasons. And if you're in doubt in any way, seeking that expert support and advice. And then just lastly, ensuring you're trying to create an open, honest and inclusive practice environment. This is going to really reduce your risk, but as well as sort of promoting that in the practice will enhance the morale of the team. So we do have lots of key policies and templates for you on the screen. So our I Comply members will have access to these. I also just wanted to make you aware that we do have some training available on the Code UK shop, it can be in the form of a DVD or an online session, and that link is on the screen for you now, and it's with regards to equality, dignity and human rights. We do obviously have the policy on iComply for you as well. And then we're, sort of breaking down that employee life cycle, where you're looking at your retirement policies, capability policies, flexible working, redundancy and recruitment. We also have guidance and support to really help you through the stages in an appraisal. And a staff competency record as well will come in, particularly useful when you're looking at your capability procedures. And you'll have probably noticed on the screen when we were looking at the menopause slide that we had a menopause policy there. So the menopause policy isn't a requirement, but it is something that one of our Total HR members were quite passionate about having. Therefore, we can create completely bespoke policies for you if you feel that you would like them. And that would be for Total HR members. Which leads me nicely into the next slide, which is looking at the Total HR and Employment Law Service that Code offer. So it's full HR documentation and contract setup. You'll also receive an annual audit in terms of your contracts and HR documentation, as well as a really, really useful and really handy web application that you can use to manage your staff. You can store documents on there, and it's particularly helpful when you're tracking and logging sickness absence, as well as holidays. You'll have unlimited access to and also have your own dedicated HR advisor, and they'll be able to support you with letters and also policies. And there is the additional employment protection cover, which can include the cost of tribunals, and you would also have the EAP number with that. If you are interested in finding out a bit more about the Total HR service, please do give our professional services team a call for a bespoke quote, and they'll be happy to talk about that in more detail with you. And just to let you know, we do have a couple of up and coming events. The first one being our iComply User Day, and that's on the 15th of November. And we also have Alex, who will be presenting the Risk Assessment Essentials webinar, and that will be with you on the 5th of December. And then for all of our previous webinars, you can visit the link on the screen at the moment. So on the previous webinars, ones I've been talking about throughout today's session in particular are your managing performance under your capability procedure and the flexible working.